Hey there, trail trekkers and tall tale seekers. You're tuned in to the 406 Life, the podcast where Montana Max, your Bigfoot buddy and outlaw gear mascot, yeah, that's me, leads you through the wild, weird, and wonderful corners of Montana. Each week we share stories, legends, and laughs from the last best place. So grab your boots and sense of adventure, because we're about to make some Montana-sized memories. This episode's powered by Outlaw Gear, where rebels get their style. Want to look legendary? Mosey over to I'mAnOutlaw.com and claim your outlaw status. Good morning, Montana. Today I want to tell you about something that happened in the Potomac Valley. One of the valleys I've called home longer than most of you have been alive. And I want to tell it right, because it deserves to be told right. 2,330 acres protected forever. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, Max, that's a lot of acres. And yes, it is. I have walked every single one of them, usually around 2 in the morning when the rest of you are asleep and the elk don't care who's watching. Those acres matter in ways that take a while to explain, so get comfortable. I don't rush. Ask anyone who's tried to follow my tracks. I take the long way, always. So let me start at the beginning. There's a stretch of Highway 200 east of Missoula that most people drive through without stopping. You're on your way somewhere. The mountains are there, the valley opens up, it's beautiful, and you keep going. But if you slow down just right, you'll see 3 old log cabins sitting north of the road like they've been there forever, because they basically have. Those cabins were built by mule teams for the Anaconda Copper Company, back when the company owned that land and was using every tree they could find to fuel their mining operation in Butte. I remember that era. The valley looked rough, stripped bare, skinned knee rough. I used to walk the ridgeline at night and look down at what was left and feel this low, heavy feeling in my chest, which is saying something because my chest is enormous. But here's the thing about Montana. It heals, slowly, stubbornly, the way things heal when they're worth healing. In 1932, during the actual Great Depression, Arnold H. and Annabelle Case showed up and decided this was a good place to build a life. On logged-over land, during the worst economic collapse in American history. That is either the definition of courage or the definition of Montana stubbornness, and I'm not sure there's a difference. They homesteaded, they ranched. They had 2 kids, a son named Arnold, a daughter named Julie. The ranch grew. The valley slowly started looking like itself again. I watched all of this. I watch everything. That's kind of my whole thing. Now fast forward about 90 years. Arnold and Annabelle's family is now 7 cousins, Arnold's 2 kids and Julie's 5 kids who go by Hacker now. About 20 years ago, these 7 cousins started having conversations about what happens to this ranch when the future arrives. 20 years of family conversations. I want you to sit with that, because I know how hard family conversations are. People disagree. People get emotional. There's usually at least one phone call that ends awkwardly. But all 7 of these cousins, every single one, eventually said yes. They said yes to a conservation easement that would permanently protect the ranch from subdivision and development. Forever. That is remarkable. I don't use that word lightly. I am a large, ancient cryptid. I have seen remarkable things. This is one of them. Now, a conservation easement does not mean the government takes your land. It does not mean it becomes a public park. The Case family still owns the ranch. They still run cattle on it. The ranch manager, Gary Metzger, who has been on that property since the late 1970s, nearly as long as I've been paying close attention to this valley, is still out there managing the Red Angus herd. The hay still gets cut. It is still a working ranch. What the easement does is make a permanent, legally binding agreement with Five Valleys Land Trust that says no future owner can ever break this land into residential lots or develop away its wildlife and agricultural values. Five Valleys holds that agreement forever. The cases keep the land. The total cost of this project was $4.8 million, and it came together like a proper Montana coalition. The biggest contribution was $2,340,000 from the USDA's Natural Resources Conservation Service through the Agricultural Land Easement Program. Missoula County came in with just under $1 million from the Open Space Bond Program, the single largest award in that program's entire history. Five Valleys Land Trust and private donors added another $995,000. The Montana Fish and Wildlife Conservation Trust contributed $100,000 specifically to support public hunting access, which I'll get back to. $4.8 million. 20 years of family conversations. 3 old log cabins on Highway 200. Ready for your next Montana home? Visit mostwantedrealestate.net, because that's how the West is sold. Now here's why this particular piece of land matters so much. Because this is where the geography starts to feel like destiny. Montana sits at the crossroads of 3 of the greatest wildlife ecosystems in North America. Up to the northwest, the Northern Continental Divide ecosystem, Glacier National Park, the Bob Marshall Wilderness, home to over 1,000 grizzly bears. Down to the southwest, the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem, Yellowstone National Park, another 1,000+ grizzly bears, and the Selway Bitterroot ecosystem covering central Idaho and western Montana. The Potomac Valley sits at the natural crossroads of all 3. Lena Weil from Five Valleys Land Trust said it plainly. Potomac provides habitat corridor connectivity as animals move between the Northern Continental Divide ecosystem and the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem. It's the connective tissue, the place where animals moving between Glacier and Yellowstone have to pass through. Derek Goebel, the conservation project manager, put it even more directly. He said that with this protection in place, you can basically draw a straight line through protected public and private land all the way to the Canadian border. Yellowstone to the Canadian border. One protected line. That is the dream of the Yellowstone to Yukon Conservation Initiative, one of the most ambitious wildlife connectivity projects anywhere on Earth. And the Case Ranch just locked in a critical piece of it. A study published in January 2023 in the journal Scientific Reports found that linking Yellowstone National Park with Glacier National Park through ecological corridors would increase the long-term persistence time of mammal species by a factor of 4.3 compared to isolated fragmented populations. 4.3 times longer. The difference between wildlife that endures and wildlife that slowly disappears. I am technically a mammal. Large, undocumented, but a mammal. So this is personal. The Blackfoot River runs 132 miles from the Continental Divide south of Glacier, westward until it joins the Clark Fork just east of Missoula. Norman McLean wrote about this river in A River Runs Through It. For wildlife biologists, it's one of the most critical movement corridors in the northern Rockies, the southern anchor of the Yellowstone to Yukon corridor. The Case Ranch sits right in the middle of all of it. 3 miles of Union Creek frontage, plus meadows, wetlands, conifer forests, and grasslands. I have crossed Union Creek more times than I can count, in summer when it's clear and low, in spring when it's running fast, and even I have to pick my crossing carefully. That creek is alive, and now the land around it is protected forever. Let me tell you who else lives out here. Grizzly bears are the most important beneficiaries. The 2 great grizzly populations, over 1,000 bears each, are currently isolated from one another. They can't interbreed across the distance between them. The Potomac Valley and the Blackfoot watershed are the key movement pathway for bears traveling between recovery areas. Heart of the Rockies initiative called this ranch incredibly significant for grizzlies moving between those areas. Real scientists said that, not me, though I agree. Elk use this valley as a migration corridor and have for as long as there have been elk in western Montana. I have watched elk herds move through the Potomac in October, hundreds of animals across the meadows in gray morning light, moving with that purposeful efficiency that makes your chest hurt if you love wild things. Mule deer, moose, black bears, Canada lynx, listed as threatened under the Endangered Species Act, they're all out here. Native bull trout hold in the cold water of Union Creek. Sandhill cranes pass through every spring and fall, calling in that prehistoric voice that sounds like time itself. I have stood in cold meadows at 4 in the morning listening to that sound come down out of the dark, and I will tell you, that is exactly why places like this have to be protected. Need shipping, shredding, prints, or a real street address? Helena's locally owned and operated the UPS store has you covered, located at 2047 North Last Chance Gulch. Stop by and get it done right. Gavin Rickliffs, managing director of Heart of the Rockies initiative, said the Case Ranch represents the final, critical piece of conservation in an area that has been a focus in Montana for decades. The valley now has 12 conservation easements. With this addition, protected agricultural land in the Potomac Valley increased by nearly 70%. 70%. As western Montana grows and the pressure on private land intensifies, this valley holds. And the hunting. 25 years, the Case Ranch has been enrolled in Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks Block Management Access Program. 1,700 acres open to public hunters at no cost every year. That access is now permanent and legally binding forever. Donna Hacker, one of the landowners, said the people of the Potomac Valley harvest meat from the wilderness to feed their families. She said hunting is good for animal populations, and that the overwhelming majority of hunters are stewards of the land. She is right. I have watched hunters in these mountains a long time. They care in a way that's hard to fake when you're sitting in a frozen meadow at 5 in the morning. Matt Case has a photograph on his wall from 1949. His father on a wagon with horses, his aunt up against a haystack they were building together. He said that picture reminds him of why they protected the ranch. From such humble beginnings, he said, this family created something, made it work, and now it will be protected forever. I have been in and out of this valley a long time, long enough to remember when it looked like a wound, long enough to watch it heal, long enough to see a family build something from nothing, on logged-over soil, with horses and stubbornness, and 2 generations of love for this particular stretch of Montana. And then, after 20 years of family conversations, actually save it. The 3 old cabins are still there on Highway 200, built by mule teams, survived the Depression, watched a family ranch through nearly a century of Montana seasons. Now they watch over 2,330 acres that will never be subdivided. The Grizzlies can still walk from Glacier to Yellowstone. The elk can still follow the routes their ancestors walked. The sandhill cranes will still call in the spring in that voice that sounds like time itself clearing its throat. And somewhere around 2 in the morning, when the moon is up and the valley is quiet, a large and somewhat legendary creature will walk the ridgeline above the Potomac Valley and feel something that, if he had to name it, he would call gratitude. 20 years in the making, protected forever. If you want to read the whole story, all the facts, all the sources, every dollar amount, and every organization that made this happen, head over to the406life.com. The full article is there. with every source linked and verified. Real journalism, real conservation, real Montana. Just written by a Bigfoot, which I think actually improves it. Find us at the406life.com. Leave that 5 stars. And if you want more Montana Max, more stories about this state, the legends, the wild places, the hidden corners, the things worth doing and seeing and knowing out here, follow the 406 Life on Facebook and Instagram. And if you want to follow me personally, I've got my own Facebook page. Just search Montana Max. My human helps me run it because, and I cannot stress this enough, my fingers are too big for the keyboard. She also helps me produce this podcast because recording equipment is small and my hands are not. And we've had some incidents. But the stories are mine. Every single one of them. Come find us. I've got a lot more to tell. Take care of Montana. I'm Montana Max. I'll be out here. Got a Montana story, business, or unsolved mystery you want on the show? Head to the406life.com and drop me a line. No smoke signals required. Don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss a stomp, stumble, or tall tale. Tell your friends, tell your grandma, heck, tell that guy who swears he saw me near Whitefish. I was just buying donuts, all right? Until next time, keep it outrageous, keep it kind, and keep living the 406 life. Montana Max, over and out.
That's the 406 life carved in